Elena Vasquez opened her eyes to darkness and pain. Her head hurt badly. She could smell burning metal and melted plastic. Somewhere far away, something screamed in a voice that was not human. Not even close to human. She remembered the ship. The Meridian's Hope. She remembered the alarms, the red lights flashing everywhere, the captain shouting orders that nobody could follow. She remembered the planet rushing up toward them through the viewport, all purple and green and wrong. Now the ship was gone, broken into 1,000 pieces and scattered across kilometers of alien jungle. Her crew was gone too, dead or lost somewhere in this nightmare forest. Elena was alone. She sat up slowly and looked around. She was lying in a small clearing where her escape pod had crashed. The pod itself was destroyed, nothing more than twisted metal and sparking wires. But she was alive. That was something. The forest around her was like nothing she had ever seen. The trees were massive, reaching up so high that she could barely see their tops. Their bark was dark purple, almost black, and it was covered with glowing fungus that pulsed with soft blue light. The light made everything look strange and dreamlike. The air was thick and wet and smelled like rotting flowers. Elena stood up on shaking legs. She checked herself for injuries. Cuts and bruises, nothing serious. Her uniform was torn but still holding together. Her boots were still on her feet. Small blessings. She found her emergency pack near the wreckage. It had survived the crash mostly intact. Inside she found 3 days of food bars, a water bottle, a small knife, and a multi-tool with a tiny plasma cutter built in. The plasma cutter was damaged, but still worked on low power. She also found a small medical kit and a thin emergency blanket. This was everything she had. This was what she would use to survive on a world that the Galactic Concordat had labeled as a Class 7 death world. The official classification meant one simple thing. This planet wanted to kill everything that walked on its surface. Elena had read the reports about Kepler 442c during her training. The wildlife was aggressive beyond reason. The plants were often poisonous. The predators hunted in ways that most species could not understand or predict. No colony had ever survived here. No research station had lasted more than a few weeks. The smart thing to do would be to find the black box from the ship and activate its emergency beacon. The smart thing would be to hide somewhere safe and wait for rescue. But Elena knew that rescue might take weeks or months. And she also knew that hiding would not keep her alive on this world. She needed food. She needed water. She needed shelter. She needed to stop being afraid and start being smart. Something moved in the trees above her. Elena looked up and saw a shape watching her from the branches. It was big, maybe 3 meters long, with too many legs and eyes that reflected the blue glow of the fungus. It was perfectly still, waiting, watching, deciding if she was prey. Elena did not run. Running would trigger its hunting instinct. Instead, she stared back at it, keeping her body language calm and confident. Predators respected strength. Predators hesitated when prey did not act like prey. After a long moment, the creature turned and vanished into the canopy. Elena let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. She needed to move. Staying in one place would get her killed. The first thing she did was search for water. On any world, water meant life. Where there was water, there would be animals drinking it. And where animals gathered, she could learn which plants were safe to eat and which ones would kill her. She walked carefully through the forest, watching everything. She noticed that some of the smaller creatures avoided certain plants. She noticed that others ate the blue fungus without harm. She noticed that the birds, if you could call them birds, with their 6 wings and needle-like beaks, they drank from certain pools, but never others. After 2 hours of walking, she found a stream. The water was clear and cold, running over smooth black stones. She watched it for a long time before she approached. A creature that looked like an armadillo with 6 legs came to drink. It seemed healthy. It did not die after drinking. Elena collected water in her bottle and added a purification tablet from her medical kit. She drank slowly and felt strength returning to her body. Now she needed to find food. Her ration bars would last 3 days if she was careful. But 3 days was nothing. She needed to learn what she could eat on this world. She remembered her grandmother's stories. Her grandmother had grown up poor in the favelas of Brazil, back on Earth, back when Earth was still the only home humanity had. Her grandmother had taught her mother, and her mother had taught her. You eat what you can find. You learn fast or you die. Elena spent the rest of the day observing. She watched what the local animals ate. She watched what they avoided. She collected samples of plants and tubers and fungus. She tested them carefully, the old way. First, she rubbed a small piece on her skin and waited. If there was no reaction, she touched it to her lips and waited. If there was still no reaction, she chewed a tiny piece and spit it out, then waited. By sunset, she had found 3 things that seemed safe. A bitter tuber that grew near the water, a type of nut from a low-growing bush, and the blue fungus which tasted strange but did not make her sick. When night came, it came fast. The purple sky turned black in minutes. The forest came alive with sounds that made Elena's skin crawl. Howls and screams and clicking noises that seemed to come from everywhere at once. She did not sleep on the ground. That would be suicide. Instead, she climbed a tree as high as she could go and wedged herself into a fork between 2 branches. She wrapped the emergency blanket around her body and held a knife in her hand. The first night was the longest of her life. Things moved below her in the darkness. Things sniffed the air and made hungry sounds. Once, something climbed the tree she was in, and she held her breath until it went away. But when the sun rose, Elena was still alive. She looked out at the purple forest stretching in every direction. She looked at the alien sky with its 2 small moons still visible in the dawnlight. She looked at her own hands, dirty and scratched but strong. Most people would have given up. Most species in the galaxy would have accepted their fate. But Elena was human, and humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and the death of their first world. They had crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. This forest did not know what it was dealing with. Elena climbed down from her tree and got to work. On the second day, Elena made a decision that would have made the alien scientists of the Galactic Concordat very confused. She decided not to hide. She decided to build. Most creatures on a hostile world tried to stay small and quiet. They found holes to crawl into. They made themselves invisible. They hoped that nothing would find them and eat them. Elena did the opposite. She cleared ground. She cut down trees. She made noise. She made herself known. This was not stupidity. This was strategy. She had spent the morning watching the predators of this forest. They were ambush hunters, every single one of them. They attacked from above, dropping from the canopy onto prey that walked below. Or they attacked from thick bush, bursting out in sudden violence. They never attacked in open ground. They never charged across empty space. Their hunting style depended on surprise, on concealment, on catching their food unaware. So Elena would take away their advantage. She would create a place where there was no cover, no hiding spots, no ambush points. A place where she could see everything coming. She found a good location near the stream. The ground was flat and the trees were not too thick. She marked out a circle about 15 meters across. Then she started cutting. The plasma cutter on her multi-tool was weak, but it still worked. She used it to slice through the smaller trees, one by one. The wood of these alien trees was incredibly dense, much harder than any wood on Earth. But that was good. Hardwood meant strong building materials. She worked for hours without stopping. Sweat dripped down her face. Her muscles screamed. The forest watched her with 1,000 hidden eyes, confused by this small creature that was changing the landscape. Instead of adapting to it by midday, she had cleared the circle. The stumps remained, but the trees themselves were down. She dragged them to the center, organizing them by size. Then she started on the shelter itself. Elena built a raised platform first. On Earth, many cultures had learned to build above the ground. The still houses of Southeast Asia, the tree houses of the Amazon, the raised granaries of Africa. There were good reasons for this. Ground-level homes were vulnerable to floods, to crawling predators, to dampness and rot. Raised homes were safer, drier, healthier. She drove posts into the ground, 4 main supports about 2 meters tall. She lashed crossbeams between them using strips of bark that she had peeled from the cut trees. The bark was fibrous and strong, almost like rope. On top of the crossbeams, she laid smaller poles close together, creating a floor. The walls came next. She wove branches together in a tight pattern, filling the gaps with leaves and moss. It was slow, careful work. Her hands became raw and bleeding, but she did not stop. On the 3rd day, she discovered the resin. One of the trees she had cut was oozing a thick golden sap from its wound. Elena touched it carefully. It was sticky and smelled sharp, almost like turpentine. She collected some on a stick and washed it dry over the next few hours. When it hardened, it became like ceramic, hard and waterproof. She began coating her walls with the resin. It sealed the gaps and made everything stronger. But she noticed something else, something interesting. The local predators seemed to hate the smell. When she walked through the forest with resin on her hands, the creatures in the canopy kept their distance. This was useful information. On the 4th night, something came to test her. Elena was inside her half-finished shelter when she heard it approaching. Heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate. She looked through a gap in the wall and saw its thermal signature in the darkness. It was massive, maybe 12 meters long, with a body like a lizard and a head full of teeth. It circled the edge of her clearing, sniffing the air, trying to understand what it was seeing. The creature was confused. It was used to hunting in dense forest, where it could hide its massive body behind trees and wait for prey to wander close. But here there was nothing. Just empty ground and a strange structure in the center that smelled of resin and fire, and something alien. It circled for an hour. Elena watched it, her knife in her hand, her heart beating fast. But she did not run. Running would make her prey. Staying still made her something else. Something unknown. Something that might be dangerous. As the sun began to rise, the creature turned and walked back into the forest. It had decided that she was not worth the risk. Elena smiled. It was the first time she had smiled since the crash. She spent the next week finishing her shelter. She built a proper roof using layers of leaves and resin, angled to let rain slide off. She created a simple door that could be barred from the inside. She built a second, smaller structure for storing food. She dug a pit for waste, far from her water source. The clearing grew and changed. She dug trenches around the edges to collect rainwater. She sharpened stakes and placed them in the ground, pointing outward to discourage anything that might try to rush her home. She hung strips of resin-soaked bark from the trees at the clearing's edge, filling the air with the smell that predators feared. By the end of the 2nd week, she had created something that no alien species would ever think to create on a death world. She had created a home. The Galactic Concordat believed that survival on hostile worlds required advanced technology. Force fields and plasma weapons and armored vehicles. They believed that biology could not compete with the dangers of a Class 7 planet. But humans had a different philosophy. Humans had survived on Earth, For 200,000 years, with nothing but stone tools and fire and their own stubborn determination, they had spread across every environment their homeworld offered. Deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands, mountains and swamps and tiny islands in endless oceans. Technology helped, yes, but technology was not the source of human survival. The source was something deeper. It was the ability to look at a hostile environment and see not just danger, but opportunity. It was the refusal to accept that any place was truly uninhabitable. Elena stood at the center of her clearing and looked at what she had built. Walls of woven wood, a roof that kept out the rain, a floor that kept her above the crawling things, stakes and trenches and the smell of resin keeping the hunters away. It was not much by the standards of civilization. It was crude and rough and would have looked primitive to anyone with access to real building materials. But it was hers. She had made it with her own hands, and it would keep her alive. That night, for the first time since the crash, Elena slept deeply and without fear. The sounds of the forest continued outside, the howls and screams and clicking calls of things that wanted to eat her. But those things could not reach her now. She had carved out a space for herself in this hostile world. She had stopped being prey. When she woke the next morning, she started thinking about her next project. Shelter was good, but she needed more. She needed reliable food. She needed better tools. She needed to stop just surviving and start actually living. And she knew exactly where to start. She needed fire. Fire changed everything. Fire always changed everything. Elena had been thinking about it for days. The ration bars were almost gone. The tubers and nuts she had found were keeping her alive, but barely. They were bitter and hard to digest when eaten raw. Her body was losing weight, losing strength. She needed better food, and better food meant cooking. The problem was starting a fire. The plasma cutter on her multi-tool could create sparks, but it needed fuel to catch those sparks and turn them into flames. Most of the plant material on this planet was too wet, too alien, too strange. She had tried using dried leaves, but they just smoked and died. Then she remembered the fungus. The blue fungus that grew on the tree bark was bioluminescent, meaning it made its own light. That required energy. And energy often meant chemicals that could burn. She collected a handful of the fungus and let it dry in the sun for 2 days. When it was completely dry, it became light and papery, almost like earth tinder. On the morning of the 3rd week, Elena built her first fire pit. She dug a shallow hole in the center of her clearing, lined it with flat stones from the riverbed, and surrounded it with a ring of larger rocks. She gathered small sticks and larger branches and the driest wood she could find. She placed the dried fungus at the center. Then she used her plasma cutter. The spark caught. The fungus began to glow, then smoke, then suddenly burst into flames. Elena added small twigs, then larger sticks, then branches. The fire grew. Heat washed over her face, warm and wonderful and familiar. And the forest went silent. Every creature within range of the light stopped moving. Every predator in the canopy froze. Every crawling thing on the ground became still. They had never seen fire before. Their evolution had never prepared them for it. Fire was not part of their world. Elena understood something in that moment. Most species in the galaxy feared fire. The Valkyrie, with their silicon bodies, saw fire as destruction. The Morthine, who breathed methane, saw it as death. The Triki, with their insect-like forms, saw it as chaos. They used fire only when it was contained in machines, controlled by technology, kept far away from living things. But humans were different. Humans had been born on a world where lightning started fires and volcanoes spewed flames. Humans had learned to use fire before they had learned to farm, before they had learned to write, before they had learned almost anything else. Fire was not their enemy. Fire was their oldest friend. Elena sat by her fire and felt something she had not felt since the crash. She felt safe. She felt powerful. She felt like she was home. Then she started to cook. She had prepared for this moment. Over the past days, she had gathered everything she thought might be edible. Tubers from the riverbank, nuts from the low bushes, small crustaceans from the stream, creatures with 6 legs and blue shells that tasted, when she tried a tiny piece raw, like rubber. The meat from a small animal she had managed to trap, something like a rabbit with scales instead of fur. She started with the tubers. She placed them directly on the hot stones at the edge of the fire and let them roast. The smell that rose from them was amazing. When she finally pulled them out and cut them open, the flesh inside had turned from hard and bitter to soft and almost sweet. She ate one immediately, burning her mouth but not caring. It was the best thing she had tasted in weeks. Next came the crustaceans. She cleaned them in the stream, removed the shells, and pushed the meat onto sharpened sticks. She held the sticks over the flames and watched the blue flesh turn orange as it cooked. When she bit into one, she almost cried. It tasted like something between lobster and chicken, rich and savory and perfect. The meat from the scaled rabbit was tougher, but cooking made it tender. She roasted it slowly, turning it over the fire until the outside was brown and crispy, and the inside was hot and juicy. She had found some leaves that released a fragrant oil when crushed, something like the lemongrass her mother used to cook with. She rubbed the leaves on the meat, and the smell made her dizzy with happiness. That night, Elena ate the best meal she had ever eaten in her life. Not because the ingredients were special or the cooking was skilled, but because she had made it herself. She had taken a hostile world and forced it to feed her. She had looked at alien plants and animals and seen not danger, but dinner. This was the human way. This was what her species did. They did not just survive. They lived. They found pleasure and comfort and meaning, even in the worst situations. They made homes in deserts and feasts from scraps. Over the following days, Elena expanded her cooking. She learned that the blue fungus, when dried and ground, made a good seasoning that added a slightly spicy flavor to everything. She discovered that the small fish in the deeper parts of the stream were delicious when fried on hot stones with a coating of crushed nuts. She found a vine that produced small sour fruits that worked perfectly as a sauce for meat. She also learned to preserve food. Raw meat rotted quickly in this climate, but smoked meat lasted for days. She built a small smoking hut next to her shelter, a simple structure where she could hang strips of meat above a low fire and let the smoke do its work. The smoked meat was tough and chewy, but filled with flavor and would keep her fed during times. When hunting was difficult, she tried fermenting the sweet tubers in water. After a week, the liquid had turned slightly alcoholic, like a very weak beer. It was not good, exactly, but it was interesting. And interesting was valuable. Interesting meant she was not just surviving, she was experimenting, learning, growing. The creatures of the forest watched her from the shadows. They did not understand what she was doing. Nothing on this planet cooked. Nothing processed food. They ate what they killed, raw and bloody, wherever they found it. The concept of preparing food, of making it taste better, of saving it for later, these ideas did not exist in their world. Elena was doing something impossible. She was bringing civilization to a place that had never known it. One evening, as she sat by her fire eating a dinner of smoked meat, roasted tubers, and sour fruit sauce, she realized something important. She was not just surviving anymore. She was not just waiting for rescue. She was building a life. The thought should have been sad. It meant accepting that rescue might never come, that she might be alone on this planet forever. But Elena did not feel sad. She felt proud. She felt strong. She felt alive in a way she had never felt before. The galaxy was full of species that needed technology to survive. They needed shields and weapons and climate-controlled habitats. Take away their machines, and they would die. Humans were different. Take away their machines, and they would build new ones. Put them on a hostile world, and they would make it home. Try to break them, and they would come back stronger. Elena finished her meal and watched the flames dance. Tomorrow, she would expand her garden. She would try to catch some of the bird-like creatures and see if she could keep them for eggs. She would improve her smoking hut and experiment with new recipes. The forest still wanted to kill her. The predators still circled in the darkness. The planet itself was still hostile and dangerous and wrong. But Elena had fire now. And with fire, she could do anything. They came on the 32nd day. Elena was in her kitchen area when she heard the sound. It was different from the usual sounds of the forest. It was mechanical, artificial, the deep hum of engines that she had not heard since the crash. She dropped what she was doing and ran to the edge of her clearing, looking up at the purple sky. A ship was descending through the clouds. It was small, maybe 50 meters long, with a hull that was dark green and covered in strange patterns. It was not a human ship. It was not a Concordat ship, but it was definitely a ship, and it was landing about 2 kilometers to the north. Elena's heart was beating fast. After a month alone, the idea of other intelligent beings was almost overwhelming. Were they friendly? Were they hostile? Did they even know she was here? She had to find out. She grabbed her knife and her multi-tool and started walking toward the landing site. She moved carefully, using all the skills she had learned over the past month. She watched for predators. She avoided the dangerous plants. She kept to the paths she had memorized. As she got closer, she could smell something chemical and strange. Ship fuel, probably. Alien ship fuel, which meant alien chemistry, which meant aliens. Real aliens. Walking around on the same planet as her dot, she found them in a small clearing where their ship had landed. There were 5 of them, and they were like nothing she had ever seen before. They were insectoid, standing on 6 legs with 2 arms that ended in complex gripping appendages. Their bodies were covered in a hard shell that was deep blue with golden patterns. Their heads had large compound eyes that seemed to look in every direction at once. They moved with quick, jerky motions, like grasshoppers or mantises. Elena recognized them from her Concordat training. They were Trekkie, a species of traders and merchants who operated on the edges of civilized space. They were known for taking risks that other species would not take, landing on dangerous worlds to harvest valuable biological materials. The Trekkie had not seen her yet. They were too busy with their own work, setting up scanning equipment and deployment drones. Their ship's door was open, revealing a cramped interior full of containers and machines. Elena stepped out of the trees and into their clearing. 5 pairs of compound eyes turned to look at her. The Trekkie froze. Their antennae, long and delicate, began to tremble with what might have been shock or fear or confusion. One of them, larger than the others and wearing a harness decorated with metal symbols, stepped forward. When it spoke, a small device on its harness translated its clicking and buzzing voice into standard galactic. "You are human?" it asked. "That's right," Elena said. "My name is Elena Vasquez. I crashed here about a month ago." The Trekkie looked at each other. Their antennae were vibrating so fast that Elena could hear them buzzing. "You have been here for a month?" the large one asked. 32 days, actually. Alone?" "Just me." The Trekkie was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke again, and its translator conveyed something that sounded like disbelief. "This is a Class 7 death world. We only land because we have protection technology. We stay inside our ship. We use machines to collect materials." A pause. "You are outside. You are standing outside on a Class 7 world." Elena shrugged. I didn't have much choice. But how? How are you alive? I built a shelter. I found food. I made fire. Elena saw no reason to be modest about this. I adapted. The tricky translator struggled with the word adapted. The concept seemed to confuse the device. Finally, it managed to produce something that sounded like change to fit. The large Trekkie, who Elena had started thinking of as the captain, took a step closer. Its compound eyes studied her carefully. We detected smoke from your fire, it said. That is why we came to investigate. We did not expect to find a living creature. Another pause. We especially did not expect to find a human living creature making food. Speaking of which, Elena said, would you like something to eat? The question seemed to confuse the Trekkie even more than her survival had. They looked at each other again, antennae waving in patterns that might have been communication. You are offering us food? The captain asked. I've got smoked meat, roasted tubers, some fish I caught this morning. It's not fancy, but it's pretty good if I say so myself. The captain's antennae went very still. Then it said something to the other Trekkie in their own language, a series of clicks and buzzes that the translator did not interpret. The others responded with sounds that might have been surprise or argument. Finally, the captain turned back to Elena. We will come to see your shelter. We will try your food. This is very unusual, but we are curious. Elena smiled. Follow me. She led them through the forest to her compound. The Trekkie moved carefully, their compound eyes scanning constantly for danger. They carried weapons that looked like small plasma guns, and two of them had shields projected from devices on their wrists. They were taking no chances. When they reached Elena's clearing, they stopped at the edge and stared. The compound had grown significantly over the past weeks. The main shelter was now larger, with separate areas for sleeping and working. The smoking hut stood nearby, thin lines of smoke rising from its roof. She had built a proper kitchen area with a fire pit, a preparation table made of flat stones, and storage shelves holding dried herbs and preserved food. There was a small garden where she was experimenting with growing the tuber plants. There was even a crude fence made of sharpened stakes surrounding a small area where she kept two of the bird-like creatures she had managed to capture alive. Trekkie captain walked slowly into the clearing, looking at everything with its compound eyes. You built all of this, it said. It was not a question. Yes. With no advanced technology. With no help. On a Class 7 death world. Yes. The captain made a sound that the translator rendered as something between a laugh and a gasp. Humans are insane. Elena grinned. We prefer the term determined. Now, are you hungry or not? She went to work. She brought out the smoked meat and sliced it thin. She roasted fresh tubers over the fire and mashed them into a soft paste. She took the fish she had caught that morning, seasoned them with dried fungus and crushed herbs, and fried them on hot stones. She made skewers with alternating chunks of meat and roasted vegetables, glazed with a sauce made from fermented tuber juice and sour fruit. The Trekkie watched her with their compound eyes, completely silent. Occasionally, one of them would click something to another, but mostly they just stared. When the food was ready, Elena handed a skewer to the captain. Try it. The Trekkie hesitated. Its species could eat almost any organic matter without harm, but that did not mean it was used to eating things that had been prepared like this. Finally, it brought the skewer to its mandibles and took a small bite. It went very still. Its antennae began to tremble again, but this time the motion was different, faster, more intense. Its compound eyes seemed to unfocus for a moment. What is this? The captain asked. Its voice through the translator sounded strange, almost choked. Just something I threw together, Elena said. The meat is from an animal by the river. The tubers are local. The sauce is made from fermented. No, the captain interrupted. I mean, what is this experience? This is not just eating. This is... The translator struggled. This is pleasure. This is art. This is something I have never experienced before. The other Tricky moved forward, reaching for the food. Elena handed out portions to each of them. Within minutes, all 5 were eating with something that looked very much like enthusiasm. The captain finished its skewer and looked at Elena with an expression that the translator could only render as deep. Respect. We have traveled to many worlds, it said. We have encountered many species. We have eaten many things. But we have never encountered this. It gestured at the fire, the kitchen, the prepared food. Other species eat to survive. They consume fuel for their bodies. But you have turned eating into something more. Something beautiful. Elena sat down by her fire and started eating her own portion. That's just how humans are, she said. We don't like to just survive. We like to live. Even when everything is trying to kill us, we find ways to make life worth living. The captain was silent for a long moment. Then it made a decision. We will return, it said. We will tell others about you. And when we come back, we will bring things to trade. Materials, technology, information. It paused. And we will bring our appetites. Elena smiled. I'll have the kitchen ready. The rescue ships came 2 months after the crash. They were Concordat patrol vessels, a pair of sleek silver cruisers that had detected the black box signal from the Meridian's Hope. They descended through the purple clouds, expecting to find wreckage and bodies. They did not expect to find what they actually discovered. The patrol captain was a Valkyrie named Crystalline Dawn. Like all Valkyrie, she had a body made of living silicon, beautiful and cold and perfectly adapted to the vacuum of space. She stepped off her shuttle into the alien forest and immediately activated her defensive systems. Force fields shimmered around her. Sensors scanned for threats. She had read the reports about Kepler 442c. She knew what kind of world this was. She did not expect to smell cooking. The smell drifted through the forest, carried by the warm, humid air. It was rich and complex, full of notes that even her silicon-based senses could appreciate. Smoke and herbs and roasting meat and something sweet underneath it all. Crystalline Dawn followed the smell. Her guards followed her, weapons ready. They found the clearing after 10 minutes of walking. And they stopped, unable to process what they were seeing. Elena Vasquez stood behind a counter made of carved wood and flat stone. She was wearing an apron stitched from cured animal hide. Behind her was a full kitchen with fire pits and preparation areas and storage shelves and smoking racks. There were clay ovens built from riverbed mud. There were barrels for fermenting. There was even a small bar area with containers of different colored liquids. And there were customers. A line of aliens waited in front of Elena's counter. Tricky traders with their insect bodies and compound eyes. Morphine merchants in their methane-filled encounter suits. Even a few Valkyrie, silicon creatures who did not need to eat but seemed to be here anyway. Watching with curiosity, Elena looked up from her work, saw the Concordat uniforms, and smiled. Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez? Crystalline Dawn asked. Her voice was like wind chimes, the natural sound of Valkyrie speech. That's me. Give me a minute. I've got a rush. You are presumed dead. Common mistake. You have been alone on a death world for 2 months. Not alone anymore. Elena gestured at her customers. Turns out there was a gap in the market. The traders who come here to harvest biological compounds, they need to eat. I needed customers. Supply and demand. She turned back to her work. A Morphine trader was next in line. Elena took its order, working with practiced efficiency. She pulled smoked meat from the rack and sliced it thin. She scooped mashed tubers from a warm pot. She ladled sauce from a clay container and arranged everything on a large leaf. She handed it to the Morphine, who took it with manipulator arms inside its encounter suit and made a sound that the translator rendered as pure. Happiness. Crystalline Dawn watched in silence. She had seen many strange things in her centuries of service to the Concordat. She had never seen anything like this. When the rush died down, Elena wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to the Valkyrie captain. "Sorry about the wait," she said. "Busy day." The Tricky brought a bunch of new traders with them this time. "Word is spreading." "Word is spreading?" Crystalline Dawn repeated. "About the food. Apparently, I'm the only restaurant on a Class 7 death world. People come from pretty far away to try my cooking. This is..." Crystalline Dawn struggled to find words. "This is impossible." That's what the Tricky said. Then they tried the Hellworld skewer. Now they're my best customers. Elena led the Valkyrie captain on a tour of her compound. It had grown enormously since the Tricky first arrived. The shelter was now a proper building with multiple rooms. There was a guest area where traders could rest while waiting for their food. There was a storage facility for the goods she received in trade. There was even a small workshop where she was learning to repair and modify the equipment the traders brought her. But the heart of everything was still the kitchen. Elena explained her menu as they walked. The Hellworld skewer was the signature dish, alternating chunks of smoked meat and roasted tubers, glazed with a sauce made from fermented river creature paste that had become famous among the Morphine traders. The forest bowl was a comfort food option, a base of mashed tubers topped with stewed greens, fried fungus, and a soft egg from the bird creatures she now kept in a proper coop. The survivor's wrap was for travelers who needed something portable. Smoked meat and pickled vegetables wrapped in broad leaves and sealed with heated resin. She also served drinks now. The fermented tuber liquid had been refined into something almost like beer. A fruit juice made from the sour berries was popular with species who could not handle alcohol. And she had recently started experimenting with a hot drink made from roasted and ground nuts that tasted surprisingly similar to coffee. Crystalline Dawn listened to all of this without speaking. When Elena finished, the Valkyrie captain was quiet for a long moment. "The Concordat will want to debrief you," she finally said. "They will want to understand how you survived here without technology." Elena laughed. "I had technology. I had fire. I had 30,000 years of human culinary evolution in my head. Every technique, every trick, my species figured out how to do this when we were still living in caves." She handed Crystalline Dawn a skewer. "On the house. Welcome to Kepler 442c. The food is good. The locals are trying to kill you, and the view is actually pretty nice once you get used to the purple." The Valkyrie captain took the skewer. Her species did not need to eat, but they could appreciate complex chemical structures. She took a small bite. And for the first time in centuries, Crystalline Dawn understood why organic species made such a fuss about food. It was not just fuel. It was not just survival. It was art and pleasure and comfort and memory all wrapped together. It was culture made physical, tradition you could taste. It was something that silicon beings, for all their advanced technology, had never really understood. "You could come back with us," Crystalline Dawn said. "The Concordat would give you a new posting. A comfortable life on a safe world." Elena shook her head. "Why would I leave? I built this place. I made it mine." She looked out at the purple forest beyond her compound walls. The same forest that had terrified her on her first night was now just background, just a view from her kitchen window. The predators still circled in the darkness, but they had learned to keep their distance. The planet still tried to kill everything that walked on it, but Elena was not worried. She had fire and food and a business to run. Besides, she added, flipping something on her grill, the commute would be terrible. Crystalline Dawn made a sound that might have been a laugh. The Concordat will want to study this place. They will want to understand how you did this. They're welcome to visit, as long as they order something. The Valkyrie captain looked at the human woman, this small creature who had turned a death world into a home, and felt something she had rarely felt in her long life. She felt impressed that other species survived. Humans nested. Other species adapted to environments. Humans adapted environments to themselves. Other species feared death worlds. Humans opened restaurants on them. Crystalline Dawn finished her skewer and nodded slowly. I will return, she said, and I will bring others. The Concordat needs to see this. I'll have a table ready, Elena said. She went back to her kitchen, back to her fire, back to the work that she loved. Behind her, the alien sunset painted the purple sky in shades of orange and gold. Around her, customers from a dozen different species waited for their food, talking and laughing and making deals. And in the forest beyond, the predators watched with hungry eyes but did not approach. They had learned what the Triki had learned, what the Morthine had learned, what even the ancient and powerful Valkyrie were beginning to understand. Humans were not prey. Humans were not victims. Humans were not creatures that would quietly die on a hostile world. Humans were survivors. Humans were builders. Humans were the species that would look at a savage hellworld and see not just danger, but opportunity. And given enough time, humans would turn anything into home. Elena smiled as she served another customer, another alien who had traveled light years just to taste her cooking. The universe was vast and dangerous and full of things that wanted to kill you, but the universe had never met anyone quite like humanity before, and it was only just beginning to understand what that meant.